I'd like to call this meeting of the Northwest Local School District Board of Education to order. Randy, if you would please call the roll.
Mr. Detzel?
Here.
Mr. Heather?
Here.
Mr. Harlow?
Here.
Mr. Unger?
Here.
And Mrs. Detzel is absent this evening.
That is correct. If you'd all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our next item is the approval of minutes.
Yes, you have the minutes for April 14th. The Treasurer and Superintendent recommend the Board of Education approve the minutes as listed.
So moved. Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I'm sorry. I'm looking at the 6:15, Randy. I wasn't there. You're right. It's got me.
I think we had an
Yeah.
executive session.
Yeah.
You weren't there for the first
Yeah,
one.
right. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, no problem.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, Randy, please call the roll. And should I read that as motion carries 4-0? Or
Yes.
Okay, I'll just read it as motion carries 4-0.
Yes.
Our next item is approval of minutes from the special meeting April 16th.
Yes, this is from the architect interviews. The Treasurer and Superintendent recommend the Board of Education approve the minutes as listed.
So moved.
Second.
The motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Randy, please call the roll. And the motion carries 4-0. Our next item is approval of the minutes from the April 21st meeting.
Yes, the Treasurer and Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the minutes as listed.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Randy, please call the roll. The motion carries 4-0. And this jumps right up to legislative update. Mr. Harlow.
Thank you. Going to begin with slightly different news. The Supreme Court today ruled by a 5-4 margin that sectarian public prayer is permissible on constitutional grounds in public meetings, including school boards. By a 9-0 rule, they agreed that non-sectarian prayer is permitted. Here in Ohio Department of Education says that their test run on next generation assessment tests given online was a success, so that will be moving forward. Also saw that school security grants that funding is running low. There will not be a second round per the Ohio School Facilities Commission, or Ohio Facilities Construction Commission as it's now called. And EMIS is changing its count week. They're doing an estimate system with 3 times with FTEs during the year to prevent drastic swings during the year. And also I want to take a special note today is Teacher Appreciation Week, and we certainly appreciate all that the teachers do for us here.
Thank you, Mr. Harlow. Our next item is the Butler Tech update. Mr. Detzel.
Dan, our meeting is tomorrow night, so at our next meeting I'll have an update.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Detzel. Our next item is the principal's report. Dr. Jackson.
Yeah, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Claudia Farmer, Principal of Struble Elementary, who's going to do a presentation on her response to intervention program at Struble.
Good evening, everybody.
I think, is that microphone on?
Is red light on?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now am I on? Tonight I'm going to present to you, along with Karen Grayson, our instructional coach, on our response to intervention. Karen's going to give you a little bit about the background of RTI, and then I'm going to move forward with what our building is doing as part of our district and building improvement plan. So I'd like to introduce Karen Grayson, who serves as instructional coach, assistant to the principal, and is our RTI chair.
Good evening. I have served as the RTI chair, I think, since about 2007. So the great thing about that, I served as an intervention specialist at Struble. So it's given me the opportunity to really see how we've grown and changed as a building and be a part of some of the new things that we've implemented as well.
Is it working?
It's the circular.
There we go. Up here on the screen, this is a pretty formal definition. It was written in 2005 by the National Association of State Directors for Special Education, and they called it a pamphlet, but it actually is a pretty thick document. I have a copy of it in my office. And just in a nutshell, response to intervention, or RTI as we call it at the building level, is the practice of providing high-quality instruction or intervention matched to student needs. So basically, as educators, we take a look at students' needs, students that are struggling, maybe academically or behaviorally, and then work as a team to determine what we can do to increase their level of performance. The reason that response to intervention is practiced in our district, it was a direct result of the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001, and there were 4 pieces that really kind of led to the formation of the RTI. All students must have access to and make progress in the gen ed curriculum. They also stated that districts must use scientifically based curriculum, assessment, instruction, and intervention. So we have to be sure that the interventions that we're using within our classrooms and in our title groups are research-based. Progress monitoring is an important part, and what that means is if we have students who are receiving intervention, that we look at them in a timely way to determine whether or not the intervention is working over time. And then also early intervention services. At Struble, we are a title-wide building, so we have a lot of students that do attend title groups and receive that early intervention that's in response to the No Child Left Behind. The purpose of RTI, again, screening and prevention of academic failure. We want to make sure we intervene as early as we can with students that are struggling. And we also can look at the results from intervention as a determination of whether or not a student qualifies for special education services. This is a rather simple model of the tiered cone that we use as a representation for RTI in our district. And just very generally to speak about that, the 3-tiered model, the green tier is tier 1, and that is where most of our students perform within the gen ed curriculum. Typically 80 to 85% of our students should be within that tier, and that consists of just the general core instruction along with any interventions that the teachers would implement in their classroom. Tier 2 is for the students who are not quite making it within the gen ed curriculum. They need a little extra support and help. Oftentimes we think of our title services as part of tier 2 interventions. And then tier 3, that's the smallest percentage of students. Those are the students who generally need some extra support greater than the tier 2 supports. Oftentimes this looks like one-on-one services. There may be a couple students to a teacher working on various things. As you move up the cone, obviously time and intensity increases. And as I said before, we serve our kids' academic needs and behavioral needs. So oftentimes we have intervention plans not only for academics but for behavioral needs as well. The next screen, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mrs. Farmer, talks about the RTI core principles, and then she's going to address the last 4 in greater detail with Struble's implementation.
There are 8 core principles that RTI has, and the first 4 I think are already in place for our building. It's 5 through 8 that we've decided that we need to continue to monitor and to work on in staff development and our staff meetings and professional development days. So we feel like the research-based instruction and interventions, that's something that we continually look at to make sure that we have those in place for our kids. And I always say that our teachers are really good at just doing the intervention, and they're not as good at monitoring it and finding a way to monitor it. But they're really good. They're so natural at just providing that intervention. But the monitoring piece is big, so that we know that it's working and that they are being successful. And then using the data to make decisions. In the last couple of years, we've gotten so much data to be able to look at for kids that it helps so that we can make good choices in what kind of interventions to do for kids. And then the last one, the use of assessments. There's 3 purposes in the screening. We kind of use universal screenings to find out what all students, where they fall, and then the diagnostic would be to specific needs for each kiddo, and then the progress monitoring piece, so that to see if the instruction and the interventions that we've put in place are are working. Now that brings us to our district and building improvement plan, and the goal of academic achievement said by the end of school year 2015-16 that students in the Northwest schools would meet or exceed the state goals in measured categories. And so for our K through 2 building, we look specifically at measurements for reading and math. And then the strategy was to monitor and the continued use of the RTI framework. And then our action steps were to provide targeted intervention programs and to continue the implementation of the RTI. So those last ones are where we the core principles, that 5 through 8 is where we're focused. And we have several things that we have done to kind of continue the implementation. We developed a card which was based off an old card that the district used for students. And it's got all the information. A teacher would use this and then pass it on to the next teacher to tell them where they are, what interventions they've had, whether they're on level, approaching, or beyond, so that we can meet those needs as they come up. We have formal data meetings with teachers, and those happen twice a year. We wait till about the first month or 6 weeks into school, and we sit down with teachers individually. Our school psych, Karen, myself, sometimes our speech and language pathologist sits in on them, the teacher, and we talk about all the kids in their classroom. You know, they're really struggling already. I've noticed this. We can tell them which kids have had interventions from the previous year, as they probably already know from the card. Behavior plans and academic interventions are passed on. So we do that again, and it kind of helps us plan the year on how we need to move forward. And then we do it again after our winter map score testing to kind of see if they've gained anything and what we need to do from there. Our RTI meetings, we've kind of tweaked those a little bit, and so that everybody's time is pretty valuable. So it definitely includes the parent, the teacher, myself or Karen, our speech pathologist, our school psychologist. Sometimes we even do meetings without the parent, just as teachers get together and say, hey, I'm really struggling, and we'll sit down with them and try to help them develop something to meet the needs for that kiddo. Our data collection and analysis, we use data folders. For each child has a data folder that they keep track of their progress, but also the progress monitoring piece that might take place by the teacher, by the title teacher. Even kids come up and do their 1-minute read for me, and we post a goal on my cabinet, and then they come up at the end of the week to see if they've met their goal. So we just kind of do it in any way that we can think of that's going to help the child to be successful. Our intervention library, we have a lot of resources in our library, and over the past couple years we've kind of tried to organize it a little bit better. So at staff meetings, I bring a couple of the books or a couple of the interventions to the staff meetings so that they can, sometimes if you see the book and you see some of the activities in it, you're more likely to use them. And then our grade level meetings, each week our teachers meet with their team, and they meet 3 times a week, but one of those days is dedicated toward talking about their students and how they can help each other. Oh, this worked with this child, so maybe you could try it as well. And then our staff development, Marzano has been our big focus for the past couple of years, and I know that last board meeting, Lori really talked about learning goals and scales, and as we talk about all those instructional strategies, they have these high yield, they're high yield strategies, and I just wanted to note that learning scales and goals, if implemented correctly, has a 21 percentile, the student could gain 21 percentile points from just that strategy alone, so why wouldn't you do some of those things? So that's been our big push. Our BLT came to me a few weeks ago and said we'd like to do a summer read, so we're going to have a book study with just the 6 of us, and we went for two books that we purchased to decide which one that we needed to do, and since Struble does not have any children that need behavioral interventions, we decided that was not the one that we needed, so we picked RTI for the early grades, and so we're going to do that as a book study this summer and then use that as part of our staff development for next year. And then last but not least is our data wall. And I know it's kind of a little bit hard to see, but with each map testing session, we put up the data wall, and each little card there is represents one particular student. So there are about 440 cards there. And the red, as Karen talked about, that's the top of the cone, that that those are the kids that need a lot of interventions, and on up to the green and the blue at the other end of the spectrum. And we've kind of learned a lot from just putting up the wall and seeing this big visual right in your face. If you can see the numbers, I'm not sure, but we were really disappointed in our winter map scores. And so we thought, well, is it the map test itself? Because we had a lot of trouble with technology. Our little kindergartners, they're happy clickers, and they just click all over the place, and they don't know what they're doing. So we didn't know if it was our instruction or if it was just teaching kids how to take an online test. So we did a lot of instruction on just clicking the mouse and what to do, how to do that. So I think we did see some gains, and we also noticed that we would like to really grow the blue, that our blue area, we did make gains in that from 9% to 13%, but we just feel like that's not enough, that we could move a lot of the kids that are in the green right now to the blue. So we continue to look at that, and after each map session, we've gone and looked at the data, and then on the back of a kid's card, we've got the AYP subgroup, so we know if it's economically disadvantaged or student with disability or African American that we're looking at to close those gaps. So, and that's kind of where we are with that. Okay.
Claudia, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
And you might have said it, and I just didn't catch it. Is this the first year you've done this, or the second year?
Of the whole RTI process. Gosh, when I was at Weigel, we were doing a version called IAT, Intervention Assistance Team. So interventions for kids has been going on, in a formal structure, has been going on for a long time. The new process of RTI, which it is a little bit different, but it's still providing those interventions and progress monitoring them. That's been, let's see, I think it was 1 year before I left Weigel. So this is the fifth year we've implemented it.
Are you seeing any correlation with improved the state scores and any with it?
We don't give any state tests with the K through 2 kiddos, so
That starts in third grade.
It starts in third, okay.
they start in third grade. So
Yeah, I go by Mofford Heights every day, and I see the last week, the testing begins, and I just was thinking it was...
well, we'd like to think we have to teach them to read,
Yeah.
because by the time you get to third grade, they're reading to teach. So we want to make sure that those kids are able to read before they leave our building.
Okay, well, thank you.
Any other comments?
Thank you, Mrs.
Thank you
Farmer.
very much.
Thank you. Our next item is report from employee organizations. Is there any certificated or licensed employee report? Seeing none. A report from classified employee organizations. A report from school-related organizations. Is there someone from a school-related organization who wishes to speak? Community communications. I have no yellow cards. Did we receive any, Mr. Bertram?
I have not.
Certificated licensed personnel item, Dr. Jackson.
Right, under certificated licensed personnel retirements and resignations, we have 3 resignations, and we have several procedural supplemental resignations. The superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the certificated licensed personnel retirements and resignations as listed.
So moved.
Second.
The motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Bertram? The motion carries 4-0. Next item, classified personnel.
Yes, under classified resignations and retirements, we have 1 classified resignation, and we have 1 procedural classified substitute resignation. Superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the classified retirements and resignations as listed.
So moved.
Second.
The motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Bertram? The motion carries 4-0. Our next item is certificated licensed personnel.
Yes, under the certificated licensed personnel, we have 2 initial administrative appointments. Those appointments are as the new Colerain High School principal, Dr. Crystal Anturney, who's in the audience and will have a proper introduction after the board approves her, and the new assistant director of curriculum, Mr. Michael Holbrook, who is also in the audience and will be introduced after the board approves him. We have one initial appointment, 3 changes in status, 2 extended service contracts, and several supplemental contracts. So the superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the certificated license personnel items as listed.
So moved.
Second.
The motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Bertram? And the motion carries 4-0.
I'd like to pause in the meeting and turn it over to Mrs. Ray, who will introduce our new 2 employees.
Northwest Local School District would like to welcome Crystal Anturney as the Colerain High School principal. Crystal comes to us from Fairfield City Schools, where she was a middle school principal. Prior to that, she was the assistant principal at Winton Woods City Schools from 2008 through 2012 and worked as a school improvement consultant at Hamilton County Educational Service Center from 2005 to 2008. Crystal has a bachelor's degree in secondary education from Bowling Green State University, a master's degree in educational administration from Xavier University, and a doctorate of education from Capella University. Crystal is here tonight with her husband Larry, her daughter Camille, who is currently in the 6th grade at Colerain Middle School, her son Carson, who is currently in 5th grade at Pleasant Run Elementary. She also has 2 other supporters at home. They are not in attendance this evening. They are 2-year-old twins, Layla and Lennox, and her mother and father. Please join me in welcoming Crystal.
Welcome.
We'd also like to welcome Mike Holbrook. Mike is coming to us as the Assistant Director of Curriculum and Intervention Services. Mike comes to us from Mount Healthy City Schools, where he was the Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction. Prior to that, he was the principal at Lakota Plains Junior High School, Hughes Center High School, and Western Hills University High School. Mike has a bachelor's degree in business communications from Wright State University, a master's degree in secondary education, and received both his principal and superintendent's license from Xavier University. Mike is here tonight with his wife, Jennifer. Please join me in welcoming Mike.
Congratulations to both of you, and we're glad to have you on board.
At this time, I would like to have Mr. Holbrook and Dr. Turney out in the front hall for a photo.
And we'll go on to classified personnel items. Dr. Jackson?
Yes, in your classified personnel items, we have 1 classified substitute and 1 change, just 1 classified, let me check something. Hold on a second. Yes, 1 classified substitute and 1 change in status. The superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the classified personnel items as listed.
So moved.
Second.
The motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Good to see Mark Farber's never going to retire, is he?
Tired people have a grind every day that there's no substitutes.
Is there any other discussion? I haven't seen him lately.
He's got a beard now.
Kind of disappeared.
You saw him and didn't know him.
He's incognito. Mr. Bertram? And the motion carries 4-0. Our next item is student services. Dr. Jackson?
Yes, I'm sorry, I was waiting for mine to refresh there. We have a 2014-15 school calendar that we would like to present. This will be the final version of the school calendar for next year. You'll be reminded that last year when we approved the teacher contract for this coming school year, we agreed that we would look at a new program for release time. Through the cuts we've made in the past, it's been very difficult to allow our teachers to have common plan time. So this is a way that we could meet every other Wednesday to discuss in grade level or content level data and then change instruction according to the data. So I will turn it over to Mrs. Ray, who led the committee of teachers and administrators to come up with this plan.
I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of a committee who has been meeting since December, and we're bringing to you the proposal and the revised calendar. There were 6 employees on the committee: myself, Jenny Bless, Director of Curriculum, Susan Smith, Principal, Bethany Miller, Ashley Reed, and Julie Fleck is actually here this evening with us. And so I want to first thank that committee for their hard work. We have been meeting since December, and we kind of started out from the ground up looking at how we would utilize time, whether the time was necessary, and then kind of got into the logistics of what release time might look like. So we started talking about late starts, early releases, and kind of went from there. We spent some time, a good amount of time, getting input from various stakeholders. So we polled the administrators, we talked with teacher leadership groups, we put out a parent survey. We got great response back. We had 1,500 responses. We did a Survey Monkey and a paper survey, and so we really feel like we got some feedback. The proposal that you'll see this evening is that we'd like to have you approve more early release time than what we have had in the past. Currently, we have 6 days of early release on the school calendar, and we would like to meet every other Wednesday from September through May next year. And early release was what we thought was most familiar in our district, as well as Wednesday was the day that we're proposing because it was the first choice of the teachers and the second choice from the parent surveys. So we're hoping to meet the second and last Wednesday of the month from September to May, which will result in 10 additional early release days or 16 early release days on the calendar. It is important to note that the last several years we've had waiver days where we can utilize time for professional development. The district does not plan on having waiver days next year. So as you know from the update that Dr. Jackson gave you, if we institute the 16 early release days, that will be a net increase of 14 hours to prepare for instruction.
Dr. Jackson, do we, isn't it next year when we go to an accumulation of hours rather than days for
Yes.
the school calendar? So
Correct.
how will this affect our total accumulation of education hours throughout the year?
The additional 16, what we're asking for is 16 days, and as Tracy said, that we end up, in the past we've missed through waiver days 30 to 35 hours of instruction, so it would actually be a net increase in terms of the number of hours of instruction compared to the last 2 years. Overall, we are approximately 20 to 25 days, depending on what grade level you look at, above the state minimum. So this will basically still allow us to miss several days of school, and it won't be a problem. So we'll still be 20 to 22 days above the state minimum in terms of the number of hours. But it does now convert it to a minimum number of hours instead of days. Correct.
That's starting with 14, 15?
That's starting with this coming school year. However, one caveat is you cannot have less school days than you have this school year. So we couldn't just suddenly decide to extend the day and go to 4 out of 5 days, things like that. You have to have the minimum number of days that you had this year, so you can't go below that.
180 days and so many hours.
Right, correct.
Okay.
Tracy, I don't see, what days are graduation on here? On the calendar for the 2 high schools?
We usually don't put those in, but each school will get their graduation dates from the and set those.
Yeah, we'll have that. We typically set that late May, early June, those dates, because they don't reserve the hall
I just
until
want
for
to make
next
sure
year.
we try not to do that as it's come about in the last 3 or 4 years at the state track meet.
Okay.
Just seeing if we can. not
I'm
hit
with you,
that
Mr.
problem.
Detzel. That's a problem when the kids
It
are
is a problem.
in 2 different places and you're the coach.
Yeah.
And appreciate all your volunteer hours on that. Spend a lot of time with that.
Yeah, that's not approved on the district calendar.
Oh, okay.
Those are basically dictated by when Millette Hall's free.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's what happens.
Plus, if we have bad calamity days, that could push our time back. I mean, we have-
Possibly, yes. We hope that doesn't.
Right, I know.
Once you order graduation announcements, you don't want to.
But, I mean, no, I mean, like, if you have them in January,
Right,
you can't.
yeah.
You have-
Any other discussion? And this is for adoption.
Yes, this is for adoption, correct.
Did we already have a motion on it? Yes, we did. Okay, so Randy, please call the roll.
You don't have a motion.
Oh, we don't have a motion? Okay, well, I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Bertram, please call the roll. And motion carries 4-0. Our next item is curriculum and instruction, Dr. Jackson.
Yes, Mrs. Heather Kidd, our math instructional specialist, would like to present an item for information, which is our math adoption recommendation for grades 6 through 8 and pre-calc, and then we'll bring it back to the board at the next meeting for approval.
Good evening. We have spent this year looking into an adoption for middle school mathematics for next year and pre-calculus. The first question that might come to mind is why pre-calculus and not the other math courses at the high school level. The last time we adopted for mathematics, pre-calculus was not in that adoption. So those textbooks are significantly older than the Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 textbooks that we currently use. So that's why at this time we're only looking at pre-calculus at the high school level. So first of all, why do we need new textbooks? I'm going to talk about middle school and then I'll talk about pre-calculus. Middle school textbooks are not aligned, the current textbooks we use are not aligned to the new standards. The rigor is not there. There are concepts that are in the 6th grade book that need to be in the 8th grade book, or the 8th grade book that need to be in the 7th grade book, and it just becomes cumbersome for the parents and the students and the teachers to try to figure out what's where. The last thing is the current books are very much rote mathematics. The problem solving is not at the level that it needs to be for the new assessments and the new standards. The pre-calculus books, again, are not aligned to the current standards. Many things that in the past you've learned at the beginning of calculus are now falling in the pre-calculus realm. They're expected to come to calculus with some of those background information that are not in the current pre-calculus books. The current pre-calculus books have a 1999 copyright date. There are no electronic resources at all except floppy disks, which can't be used on any current technology. So that's an issue, especially since pre-calculus is a blended course. So that's become kind of an issue for those teachers. The last item, and probably in my kind of opinion the most important, the current textbooks are falling apart and can't be rebound anymore without losing content off the side of the page. I want to talk you through the process that we've gone through. This was not just a willy-nilly decision that we made. First, I contacted the textbook companies and asked them to send me all of their middle school and or pre-calculus items. Then we went through a long process with the team, and the first and foremost was we wanted to check for alignment with the standards. And we also looked at the resources, the organization, how we thought they would be used by the families. So it was a big, long evaluation process, and that allowed us to take it down to 3 different series that we decided to pilot. During the piloting, the middle school teachers, including special education teachers, piloted 2 of the 3 series each. And during this time, we also hosted an open house for parents and community members to give their input and to evaluate and look at the textbooks. At the end of the piloting period, the teachers completed final evaluations, and then the team got back together as a whole group and looked at the data, considered the strengths and weaknesses of each program, and decided on a final recommendation. I keep referring to the team. There were 3 6th grade teachers, 1 from each building, 3 7th grade teachers, 1 from each building, 3 8th grade teachers, 1 from each building, and 3 special education teachers, 1 from each building. The special education teachers, some of them teach resource rooms, some of them teach in an inclusion setting. So we wanted to kind of get input across the board in special education so that everyone's thoughts and concerns were heard. And we decided on to recommend to you Big Ideas Math, which is a Houghton Mifflin Harcourt product. And this was the final evaluation. This was not the big to-do that we did at the beginning, but this was after the teachers had piloted the textbooks and just a last kind of thought of what they saw. So the bulleted points are the things that they were asked to rank, and the 1, 2, 3, 4 is how they were asked to rate each of those items. And Big Ideas ended up with a 3.42 overall average on those items. These were just some additional comments that the teachers had. The internet resources is a big plus of the Big Ideas Math. The website is very good, and it has a lot of information there. There's a student portal, there's a parent portal, and a teacher portal, so there's plenty of information out there for everyone. They thought that there was a lot of ease for differentiating for the students, which is a huge task at the middle school level. That was kind of, overall they were happy with this one. Strengths of the program. The first one is really important. Mathematics is not what it was when I was in elementary school and middle school. You don't just sit and listen to the teacher for 45 minutes. Inquiry-based learning is really important, but I think there's also a balance there with direct instruction. And again, the strong website for the teachers, students, and parents. There's multiple print resources, again, for all levels of learners. The performance assessment is going to be a big part of the PARCC assessment when those come into play. And there's a sample performance assessment in each unit so that our students can get used to participating in that kind of activity. And last but not least, there's a compacted 7th and 8th grade for our advanced students. And typically, they have to use a 7th grade textbook and an 8th grade textbook. Big Ideas actually pulls materials from both textbooks to create a specific textbook for those advanced students, so they're not trying to go back and forth between two textbooks, which we thought was a definite strength. The pre-calculus process was basically the same, except we only chose 2 books to consider further, and the teachers were not able to pilot those. We were kind of told that that was not common practice for pre-calculus just because of the level of the course. The teachers did, instead of piloting, they took it back to their home schools and got input from all the pre-calculus teachers in their building, and not just the 2 people on the team, so that it was, there was more information there. But the rest of the process was basically the same. The actual team members were Elizabeth Fiersick from Colerain High School and Chris Wagner from Northwest High School. And we are recommending to you Glencoe Pre-Calculus from McGraw-Hill. These are the same evaluation standards as the middle school program, and this came up with an overall average of 3.5 on those items. The strengths of the textbook. The first one is kind of the most important, one of the most important in our eyes. This textbook was written for the high school student. That is difficult to find in the pre-calculus realm. Everyone kind of has latched on to the college textbooks, which are fine, but it doesn't provide the resources that you need to teach in a high school classroom. College courses in pre-calculus, you're looking at 3 hours of lecture a week, whereas a high school pre-calculus for a semester, a high school pre-calculus course, you're looking at 5 days a week for a whole year, and there are just other needs, beyond what a college class would have. So they really liked that this textbook was written for the high school student. There are print materials for remediation and enrichment. It attacks the calculus building blocks from the very beginning. So in chapter 1, it's attacking limits, which in our current book aren't attacked until about chapter 12 or 13. So it's attacking those calculus building blocks from the very beginning. The strong online resources was another reason we chose this book over the other one. Again, the other one was more written for a calculus or a college course, and so that did not have the online resources that we felt were necessary for a high school curriculum. And last but not least, there's the ALEX program, which allows for individualized instruction for each student, which again we thought was important for this level. And again, I just want to remind you with those last 2 items, which are both online resources, there are blended pre-calculus courses in our district. So the online portion is very important. That is all that I have for you. Are there any questions?
Yes, what is the copyright date on these new books?
The copyright on the Big Ideas is 2014. Those were just, Big Ideas is older than that, but they were just reworked and reconfigured last summer. And pre-calculus, I'm sorry, that's terrible. The pre-calculus copyright is 2014 as well.
Yes, they are very new. And this you mentioned some or all of the content's available online?
Yep.
So as time goes by, when anything new comes along, the student could refer to the online portion of it and see the new content.
Absolutely.
Great.
Heather, I'll tell you one thing, they sure jazzed up those books from what math books used to look like. With the blended learning, what percent does the student do online versus from the book?
Okay, well, we use the Blackboard learning platform that all of their assignments are given to them online. But I would say in terms of, well, currently they don't use the textbook in pre-calculus at all, just in the blended room. But for the Algebra 2, which I currently teach, I would say we do about 50-50 with the textbook, and but they use the online version of the textbook and then versus other items. But again, that's been an issue with the pre-calculus course just because of the age of the book.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Can you please give us some examples? You said in the middle school curriculum where things that were covered in 8th grade were now being taught in 6th and vice versa, and things moved around. And
Actually, in the 6th grade, they start solving linear equations, which used to be an Algebra 1 topic way back in the day. And then just even in the last couple years, that's been more of an 8th grade topic or 7th grade topic, and it's moving down to the 6th grade. They start looking into positive and negative numbers in the 6th grade. 7th grade, they start solving two-step linear equations, which again is typically a high school Algebra 1 standard, and then it was kind of an 8th grade standard, and now it's moving down to the 7th grade.
So linear equations, those are like the graphing with the y equals mx plus b or whatever. And
and then
the
solving
slopes,
for
and then
x.
The two-step problems. Refresh my memory here. I mean,
so if you have like 2x plus 5 equals 13, and you want to know what x equals.
Okay, so that's a two-step. Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. There are textbooks here if you would like to look at those before the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather. Nice job.
The next item on the agenda is community communications. If anyone has any questions for our presenter, Ms. Kidd, or any other topic we've covered this evening, does anyone have any questions? If you could approach the podium.
I actually don't have a question. I'm Kevin Kane, counselor at Corey Middle School, president for the Teachers Association. I want to thank you for passing the calendar for next year. There's an increased need for us to look at data, to organize it and analyze it, and this new schedule will allow us to work collaboratively with our administrators and with all the teachers and their content team to look at that data and hopefully improve our instruction. So I thank you for approving that calendar for next year.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say? Seeing no one else, move on to the next item, which is other board items. Mr. Harlow.
Before we, I'd just like to make one comment and just wish or thank the teachers for all their hard work this year. It's Teacher Appreciation Week, and we certainly do appreciate how hard they've worked this year. It's been one of those years where we have new standards we're trying to implement, a new evaluation system, and this is the week that they're getting the information in terms of how all that comes together. So I'd like to just remind them that we have a teacher evaluation team that will look at all that information and try to make that evaluation system better. But particularly, I just want to thank them for all their hard work this week or this year, and that's it. Just to thank them for that.
Okay. Other board items, Mr. Harlow?
Yes, two things. First of all, I wish all of our students well this week in the Ohio Achievement Assessments. And one other thing I just wanted to mention, should have brought it in my legislative update. Tomorrow is Election Day here. At least well, there's statewide and countywide issues on the ballot, and in Colerain Township there's a police levy as well. And just wanted to remind everyone to get out and vote. At the very minimum, you'll have a county levy for MRDD and for a state issue on bonds for infrastructure improvements. So there is something for everyone to vote on tomorrow. Don't have to be a Democrat or a Republican. You can pull an issues only ballot and take it from there.
Thank you, Michael. Mr. Detzel?
I don't have any comments.
Mr. Heater?
Dan, I just wanted to turn on my microphone first. I know it was a very contentious meeting last couple weeks ago, and just wanted to explain, the comments, uniforms, and valedictorian and all that. My thoughts all along, in fact, I think Dr. Jackson might even remember me saying, is there any way we could do both about valedictorian and still have the recognition for the kids that were at the top? Anything like that would involve lots of input, but this isn't dictatorship by fiat or anything like that. The uniform thing, as Mr. Carpenter has brought up many times, you've got Northwest High School, who's now had it for 6, 7, 8 years, and when you do have 23 students expelled all at once, you sort of think you got to do something, and that's just an idea. We got to give 6 months notice. We can't do anything before that. There would be community input when we did vote with Northwest, and I think that kind of delayed the process. As I recall, it was like 75% to 25% by the parents. So it's been 8 years, Dexter. But it was still, that's a landslide, and so 2 to 1. So just understand the process will be fair, and certainly everybody will have input if we go that route. I'm just looking for something to keep our schools, when you have these sort of events and it's all over Channel 9 and they're parking out there, and Channel 5 and 12, they love stories like that, and it does resonate with the community and what's going on in the schools, this sort of thing. So I'm just looking for answers, and that was my idea based on what we did at Northwest. Dan?
Thank you, Dr. Heater. It is getting that time of the year when the weather has warmed up and the teenagers are out driving, and any of you that are parents, such as several of us are up here at the table, tell your kids to slow down. Nobody's indestructible, and I'm looking for a good, safe summer for all of our students, and just please have a talk with them about their driving habits. And thank you all for coming. I'm glad to get you out of here at 10 till 8 rather than 8 till 10. So, thank you all for coming. Our next item is a...
Can I make one more comment? Sorry, I know I'm not.
Yes, we can change the agenda, and you can make them right. Just
I
get
would
them out of
just
here,
like
Andrew.
to thank all the bus drivers as well for it's Bus Driver Appreciation Week this week as well. So I'd like to thank all school employees. If you've ever worked for a school in your life, I want to say thank you. Yeah. And nurses.
And Andrew, I would like to thank you.
Yeah, every day Superintendent Appreciation Day.
And it is nice to end the meeting on a high note, so I'm going to go right ahead and call for a motion for adjournment. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
Sure, yes, so moved.
A motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Bertram? And the motion carries 4-0. This meeting is adjourned.